Siege of Malta by Francisco Balbi, Chapter 6. A general assault is beaten off and Dragut is killed. Saturday the 16th of June. The general assault began at dawn. So great was the noise, the shouting, the beating of drums, and the clamour of innumerable Turkish musical instruments that it seemed like the end of the world. Throughout the night preceding the assault, the Turks had been assembled on the high ground near the fort, shouting at the top of their voices, as is their custom when praying. 2 hours before dawn, their priests absolved them of their sins, exhorting them to fight well and to die for their false faith. We knew this because we could hear first one man singing for a time, then all the army responding in unison. They kept this up until the sun rose, which was the signal for their attack. The men of St. Elmo were ready to meet them. At the appointed hour, the general assault began. It was concentrated, determined, and ferocious, but was met with an equal courage and determination by the defenders. In fact, the courage and tenacity of the garrison was greater than that of the enemy. The attack was marked by considerable use of incendiaries and fireworks on both sides. Our men suffered more from their own fire than they did from that of the Turks, due to the fresh westerly breeze which drove the smoke from their own fire, as well as from that of the Turks, into the defenders' eyes. But a far greater misfortune than that was all the fireworks in St. Elmo caught alight, depriving the defenders of these invaluable weapons and also burning many of them to death. At the peak of the battle, over 30 Turks using scaling ladders got onto the point of the spur of the cavalier facing Massa Macheto, the post of Colonel Mass. When the Grand Master saw from St. Angelo what had happened, he had our gunners open fire on it to try and help the defence. But in the confusion and haste, so much a part of battle, the gunner laid his cannon further to the right than he should have done, with the result that the shot killed 8 of the defenders. This accident could well have lost us St. Elmo if the knights and soldiers at the post had not displayed great calmness. They did not withdraw from the position but signalled St. Angelo. The fall of the shot had in fact been observed and the gunner corrected his aim. His next shot fell in the middle of the Turks on the fortification, killing over 20 of them. Our men killed the remainder with fire and cold steel, throwing their bodies down from the wall so that not one of them escaped. From St. Michael we could see one of our soldiers fighting like one inspired, with a trump in his hands. We learned later that all the Turks who were on the spur during this engagement were men of importance, Sanjak Beys, galley captains, and chieftains. The attack lasted for 7 hours, and in each onslaught the Turks sent in a wave of fresh men. By the grace of God, they then retired, having lost over 1,000 of their best and most distinguished warriors. The knights Hernando de Heredia and Don Juan Mascon assured me that if the Turks had attacked once more, St. Elmo would surely have been lost that day. There was not a man in the garrison who could stand to his post through fatigue. Our losses were 150 dead and a great many more wounded. Among the dead was Captain Medrano, who had bravely repulsed a Turk in the act of raising a flag upon the gabion. Medrano dashed forward to remove this flag, but before he could do so, an arquebusier shot him in the head and killed him. He was a man of the greatest courage, as he had proved in every action. Another who was wounded was Captain Miranda, but he refused to retire to Birgu. He had himself seated in a chair near the guns, where he stayed to the end of the action. The other wounded knights were transferred to Birgu. In this great assault, as I was told by the knights, it was not only they and their soldiers who fought well, but the convicts and the mercenaries, and indeed the Maltese, every one of whom fought as if he were a man of noble birth. The wounded, as well as the bodies of some of the knights, were quickly taken over to Birgu. La Valette gave orders that Medrano was to be buried among the Knights of the Grand Cross. This was the greatest honour that they could pay him, and one which he well deserved. 3 regimental colours were captured by our men in this action, 2 complete and 1 torn. One of these had been a personal standard of Mustafa Pasha, and another of Dragut. During the night, Valette sent further reinforcements to St. Elmo under the command of Ghianu. They consisted of 150 soldiers and a great number of sappers. With them, they took more than 200 mattresses as well as tents, rope, sails, for the garrison had no material with which to improvise repairs. While this was happening, the Turks destroyed their camp in the village of St. John. We reckoned that they were getting ready to leave because of their great losses, and because this camp was in the middle of their lines of communication between the fleet and their headquarters. Their real objective, however, was to concentrate their forces, for they had already lost over 4,000 of their best and outstanding men. This same night, La Valette sent 2 small fast boats to Don Garcia. One was captured by the enemy, but its crew managed to swim ashore. Sunday the 17th of June. The spur was bombarded on its southern side by 6 cannons from the main Turkish battery. Other than this, there was no further action during the course of the day, the Turks being engaged in recovering their dead from the ditch and burying them. All the same, the condition of the fort was desperate and indeed almost hopeless. But 12 Italian knights, with the Admiral's permission, went to the Grand Master and volunteered to join the garrison. Accepting the fact that, as they said, they wished to fulfill their vows to God and the order, La Valette praised them for their courage and thanked them. He told them that there would be plenty of time in which they could show their spirit, but he did not allow them to go. The fact was that Miranda had already sent him a message that the whole garrison of St. Elmo was certainly doomed, as was proved on the following day. Monday the 18th of June. The bombardment of St. Elmo continued, 2 further cannon having been added to the enemy battery firing on the spur. Ceaselessly by day and night these 8 guns kept up their fire, but, as if this was not enough, on the advice of Dragut they erected a gun platform below the cave, near the water's edge facing St. Angelo. From the counterscarp of the ditch facing towards St. Angelo, they now dug a trench extending down to the shore, near the place where the reliefs from Birgu landed. They had realised that as long as these relief forces could reach St. Elmo, there was no chance of capturing it, and this new trench would ensure that they could no longer get through. Like one who clearly understands the will of God, the Grand Master, as soon as he learned this, gave thanks to God that he had allowed the Turks to be so slow in realising their mistake. Had they done this at the very beginning, St. Elmo would have been taken within 4 days. St. Elmo lived, as they say, from day to day. La Valette had never lost hope that relief promised by Don Garcia would arrive, but when it did, it was unfortunately at least 10 days too late. One piece of news which comforted the Grand Master at this time was brought by a Lombard renegade who arrived in Birgu saying that Dragut was dead. Something that we were all glad to hear. The Lombard said he had seen Dragut laid low, his brains spattered from his mouth, nostrils and ears. There was no chance of saving his life, the renegade maintained, and if he lied, the Grand Master might have him hanged. La Valette was very pleased at this, and the news was confirmed that night by renegades who arrived at the post of Don Francisco de Sanaguera and said that there was no hope of saving the great corsair. Dragut was killed by an accident. So as not to be taken by surprise in night attacks, the Turks used to build double trenches, and he was standing on the central scarp of one of these, when he saw that the gunners were aiming their cannons too high. He ordered them to aim lower. Their aim was still too high, so he again ordered them to lower it. Standing as he was with his back to the guns to observe their fire, a shot from one of them, which was now aimed too low, hit the trench behind him. A piece of rock thrown up by the cannonball struck him on the head, and if it had not been for his turban, he would have been killed on the spot. The very same shot killed the Master General of the Turks, Soli Aga. Day and night we worked on the fortifications of Birgu and St. Michael. Tuesday the 19th of June. The 8-gun battery with which the Turks had been bombarding the spur was now augmented by a further 2 guns. The position was soon so battered that it would have been easy to scale. It was fully expected that the enemy would attack again, but they did not intend to do so until they had completed the new trench and battery near the cave. Both were under fire from St. Angelo, but with little result since they were protected from that side, and the guns on St. Elmo could not be turned against them in view of the fire from the enemy trenches and the intense bombardment. All that the garrison could do was to repair the fortifications with blankets, mattresses, and sails wetted with seawater as protection against the enemy's incendiaries. The new Turkish battery was almost ready. Their trench had gone so far out that our men drawing water to throw on the breastwork were now in great danger. So many of them were killed that there was little hope of getting any more water. During the night, either by chance or possibly treachery, a small powder mill in St. Angelo caught fire. It blew up and killed 8 men who were working or sleeping there. As soon as the Turks saw the flame, they shouted for joy, thinking that the damage was greater than it was. But La Valette sent 6 cannon shots in their direction, and that soon stopped their bestial noise. Wednesday the 20th of June. The new gun platform designed to stop reinforcements landing at St. Elmo was completed, and on the following night, the Turks got the guns in position. Throughout the day and the night, the Turkish bombardment was relentless. All the while they kept on dumping brushwood and earth into the ditch, for which purpose they had cut down the few trees and little shrubbery that were in the island. The garrison sallied out to burn the wood, but it was so well mixed with earth that they had little success. The situation was becoming desperate. We could no longer send boats over to St. Elmo, and La Valette could therefore no longer maintain communication with the beleaguered fortress. Tuesday the 21st of June, the feast of Corpus Christi. All day the Turks kept up their usual bombardment, as well as getting ready new siege devices for the reduction of St. Elmo. We for our part did not fail to honour this great and noble day, as best and devoutly as we could. The Grand Master took part in the procession and himself carried one of the poles supporting the canopy, along with the Knights of the Grand Cross. The Bishop of Malta bore the monstrance. All the knights, commanders and soldiers, excepting those on guard duty, took part in the procession, together with the women and children, and begged our Lord to deliver us. The procession took a different route from the usual one, so as to be under cover and not to attract the Turkish fire. The Grand Master, with a napkin laid over his shoulder, carrying his baton, served 13 of the poor with food. The Knights of the Grand Cross brought food and served it to as many of the poor as asked for it. This is a remarkable custom of the order and a most commendable one. The Turks continued to scour the island, and during the course of one of these expeditions, their troops ran into a party of over 20 Maltese horsemen. When the knight Thomas Coronel, who was now in command of the cavalry, heard of this, he and Vincenzo Anastasi, who had taken the place of Juan Vagnon, led a mixed party of cavalry and infantry out of Medina. They rescued the Maltese troops in a battle during which many Turks were killed. The garrison of St. Elmo, even though they were at their last gasp, never stopped trying to find some way to destroy the Turkish bridge. They had attempted on many occasions to destroy it with gunfire, but with no success. Now an Italian soldier, Pedro de Forli, volunteered to go down on a rope from the wall and set fire to the bridge with a trump. This he did, but without success because the bridge was too well covered with wet earth. Since they knew that no more reliefs could get through to St. Elmo, the Turks felt confident that their next assault would succeed. They had also constructed a trench on top of the Cavalier from which their arquebusiers commanded the whole position. As soon as a man showed himself, he was shot down, and there was no way in which the garrison could dislodge them from this new position, as Miranda had already informed the Grand Master. It was known by now that Valette had little hope of saving St. Elmo, for he could send neither supplies nor reinforcements to the fort. All that he could do was to beg our Lord to show mercy to our brothers out of his infinite compassion, and to beseech him not to allow the enemies of his holy faith to triumph. But knowing that there was little hope for St. Elmo, and anticipating the main defences of the island would soon come under attack, he pushed ahead with the work on the fortifications of Birgu and St. Michael. Day and night without any rest, the garrison worked on the defences. Friday the 22nd of June. The enemy bombarded continuously throughout the night, as well as raising many false alarms. Everything indicated that there would be a large-scale attack in the morning, and this is exactly what happened. At dawn, the enemy came forward in their third general assault, and so great was the noise, and so violent their attack that it was truly terrifying. It was by far the most bloody and effective one they had made. Under covering fire from their guns, they attacked by way of the bridge, But on this day they did not confine themselves to one place, but laid their scaling ladders against the walls at every point on the fort's circumference. There was not a single place where there was not some fighting going on. Both sides showed immense courage and endurance with consequent heavy losses. It was around the bridge that the battle raged most fiercely, and at the spur of Colonel Mass's bastion. At this point the Turks were trying to breach the wall, while our men were trying to protect the gabions to which the enemy had secured ropes to pull them down into the ditch. The Turks attacking at this point came under heavy fire from the guns of St. Angelo. Over by the bridge, their attack was resisted with cold steel, with fire and with rocks. But the worst casualties of the day were caused by the arquebus fire from the ditch on the Cavalier, where their snipers picked off all our leaders. The guns and powder of those who had fallen were picked up by the defenders, reloaded, and directed against the Turk attacking the post of Colonel Mass. At long last, to the fury of the Turks, they were forced to retire. The attack had lasted 6 hours and they had lost about 2,000 killed and twice that number wounded. They had intended this to be their final assault and had attacked with every hope of a complete success. When the Turks withdrew, there was not a single officer left in the garrison. Over and above this, 500 Christians lay dead. There were only about 100 men left, nearly all of them wounded and without ammunition or any hope of relief. That night, a swimmer was sent over from St. Elmo to tell La Valette the position and to beg him for assistance. The messenger said that there was not a man left in St. Elmo who was not covered with his own blood as well as that of the enemy, and they had no ammunition left at all. God knows what the Grand Master felt, but so as to not dispirit the men around him in the square, he spoke as if with good heart. The garrison of St. Elmo have taught the Turks a lesson. I trust in God that they will never take the fort. Such were his words, but no man can tell what his feelings really were. Despite everything, La Valette made an attempt to send reliefs to St. Elmo. He sent over Captain Fanton in a galley without its mast. Knight Rostand de Lourdun, Captain Villavecchia and Romgar also went over in their own boats, but they were unable to get through. Not only did they come under fire from the trench on the shore, but they also ran into over 80 galleys just off Ranella Point. Mustafa was determined to take St. Elmo on the following day. That same night, our poor brothers in St. Elmo, realizing that no relief could reach them, made themselves ready to die in the service of Jesus Christ. They consoled one another in their great anguish, and although half dead from exhaustion, they took no rest, but worked all night on the defences. Unfortunately, they had no water with which to drench the breastwork. To add to their trials, the Turks kept up the bombardment all night, sounded alarms, and made sporadic attacks. They did this so that when morning came, the defenders would be worn out. The garrison of St. Elmo, like men who know that the next day will be their last on earth, confessed to one another. They besought our Lord out of his infinite mercy to take pity on their souls for the sake of his precious blood which had redeemed them. End of chapter 6.